This is the White Coat Investor Podcast, Milestones to Millionaire, celebrating stories of success along the journey to financial freedom.
This is Milestones to Millionaire Podcast number 245. Physician aids her parents in buying their first car with cash. This podcast is sponsored by Bob Biani at Protuity. He's an independent provider of disability insurance planning solutions to the medical community in every state and a longtime White Coat Investor sponsor. He specializes in working with residents and fellows early in their careers to set up sound financial and insurance strategies. If you need to review your disability insurance coverage or to get this critical insurance in place, contact Bob at whitecoatinvestor.com/Protuity today. You can email info@protuity.com. You can also call 973-771-9100. All right. All of you out there getting new jobs this fall, right? All you PGY 3s or PGY 8s or PGY 17s, whatever, you're going out into the real world, or maybe you're changing jobs. Get your contracts reviewed. Okay, I can't believe how many docs sign dumb contracts without actually knowing what they're signing. It does not cost very much to have your contract reviewed. Go to whitecoatinvestor.com/contract review. We've got a number of providers there. They're all great. They'll all tell you what you're signing, answer your questions, help you negotiate. They'll even negotiate for you. They might charge a little more to do that. They'll tell you what you're worth. They'll show you what other contracts they've been reviewing for people in your area and your specialty, and give you an idea of what you're worth and what a fair price is. This is not doing this is being penny wise and pound foolish. Please get your contracts reviewed. All right, we have got a great interview today. I'm looking forward to this one. I think you're going to love it. And we're going to talk a little bit afterward about helping your parents with their finances. We're going to get kind of personal today. So let's have some fun. Our guest today on the Milestones to Millionaire podcast is Rebecca. Rebecca, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Tell us about the where you live in the country, what you do for a living, how far you are out of training, et cetera.
Sure. I live in San Diego, California, which is a beautiful place to live, but definitely high cost of living. I graduated from training in 2022, and I do half-time research and then half-time maternal fetal medicine and clinical genetics.
Okay, very cool. All right. Well, we have a unique milestone today. I don't think we've ever celebrated in 244 prior episodes. Tell us what milestone we're celebrating today.
Sure. So I helped my parents actually save enough money that when their car died, they were able to, with their own money, buy a car with cash.
Very cool.
In their 75 and 76 years, have never purchased anything larger than, I'd say, $500 to $1,000 with cash.
Wow. Pretty awesome. All right. We need some background information. Okay, tell us about your parents. Are they immigrants? Or they grow up in relatively, lower class circumstances? Tell us about your upbringing and all. Tell us the story. This is a super interesting story.
Sure. So I think most of your listeners will probably have read the Millionaire Next Door book or something associated in that family. And when I first read that, the thing that stood out to me is that my family is like the poster children for underaccumulators of wealth. I think my parents have made almost every kind of big financial mistake that you can make. My dad definitely had a whole life insurance policy. They were relatively high earners and had their own company, but I don't think really took advantage of most of the tax benefits and really didn't have thoughtful retirement savings. They had a trust from like the sale of grandparents' houses and kind of used all of that. And whenever they got money in, they would spend it very quickly. And so I think I would say I didn't have a very good financial background in education. They were not immigrants. They, I think, came from families that were very low income and just didn't really have good financial education themselves and didn't have the support or education. They didn't go to college. They're both high school graduates. So they really didn't have that good background.
Okay, well, let's turn the page now and tell us a little bit about your story, because, coming out of this kind of upbringing, you're a doc. So at some point, something changed there education-wise in your family. Tell us about that.
Yeah. I'm actually a very grateful kind of first generation college student. I went to UCLA and I was very fortunate to have a full ride scholarship there. So I didn't have educational debt coming out. And my whole goal was to go to college. I didn't have any other goal because that was something that was never previously attained in my family. And then after college, I was in this weird spot where I was like, well, I did the thing and now what do I do? And I loved genetics and I got a job in a hospital cytogenetics lab and kind of just followed different people around and really loved what the pediatric geneticists did. And I had really wonderful mentors. And so I decided to go to med school and went to med school without any plan to have any help in terms of finances. I went to a relatively expensive medical school and had to fund the whole thing on student loans. And then, I think medical school, particularly when you're living on your own in a new place, is very expensive. And I actually wound up kind of getting consumer credit card debt, having a personal loan that I needed because of the need to, I took out like a residency relocation loan that had a stupidly high interest rate. And then I was in residency and not making very much. And I had this consumer debt and this residency relocation loan. And I was living in Boston, which is a really high cost of living area. And you're so busy as a resident and a fellow. I was just kind of playing an ostrich and getting worse and worse as opposed to better. And now with like $500,000 of educational debt. So at some point, I read your book and I met with a financial planner and started to take some small steps and then had a small windfall of money that from a relative dying in COVID in a terrible way that helped us wipe out what was ultimately a small amount of consumer debt. And then just started to slowly kind of take the right steps.
So you started becoming financially literate, financially disciplined. Really, it sounds like after coming out of training.
Yeah.
And at some point, you turned your mind back toward your upbringing, toward your parents, and you decided, I got to share these blessings with people I care about. Tell us about that process.
Yeah, absolutely. I moved back to San Diego so that my 3 children could grow up with their grandparents who are, despite their maybe not having the best financial background, the most wonderful, loving, phenomenal people who, part of their problem is if they had 2 cents and they saw somebody who needed it, they would give it away.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just wonderful people. And as somebody who now knows more about finances, I kind of observed how they live their lives and just started to make small changes for them. I opened a separate Vanguard account, and when their Social Security, wage increase happened, but their cost of living didn't really rise that appreciably, I just, asked their permission and created an account in their name and started transferring $200. And they're the kind of people that they like to see a certain amount in their accounts, and they will change their behaviors so that they have that amount in their accounts. So I just, every time they were above that amount, I'll just take it out and move it. And then they would slightly adjust their behavior, not in meaningful ways, but in they wouldn't go out and get Thai food. They would eat at home. Mm-hmm. And little things like I started buying them some groceries that they would eat food at home more instead of going out because there were things that were made, just small changes that really over the last 2 years have added up significantly so that when the time came and they needed something, they had the money to do it.
Awesome. So tell us about the car. The old car died or what happened?
Yes. They had it wasn't even that old. It was like a 2012 Mazda. And my dad was a mechanic, so I don't really know how this happened, but I think he never really got it serviced. I think he got oil changes, but didn't actually have the transmission serviced. And so the transmission failed, as it does. And
in a 2012, when the transmission fails, it's totaled.
Yeah. And a 2012 Hyundai, when the transmission fails, you're done. So, he had looked around and his neighbor got a new Hyundai and wanted to go get that car. And I pulled out a, calculator and was like, because his thought was it's only going to be $200 or $300 a month. And I said, well, if you actually calculate that out over the life of the car, you're paying like $33,000. for that car. And I think that that's probably not worthwhile. So that kind of broke his brain, and he didn't even think of ever paying it with a car for cash. And then I was like, well, you have $25,000 in this account, so let's go find you the right car.
So did you go car shopping with him, or how'd
I
that
went
go?
car shopping with him. I learned a lot about my dad's unique behavior preferences, but ultimately they got a used Toyota Corolla that they're very happy with. And I have a calendar invite in my calendar to remember when they're going to need to go get their car serviced.
Did they spend the whole $25,000? How much did they end up spending?
No, I think they wound up spending about $18,000.
Okay.
It's
Very cool.
It's maybe 2022. It's not new, but it's.
How did they feel having a car that was paid for? It sounds like maybe for the first time, at least the car right after they bought it.
I think very uncomfortable. They're still trying to get used to it. They're in their mid to late 70s. They're just, they're creatures of habit. And I think my mom is very grateful because she was worried about having a new payment every month. But, they're having a great time. They're driving around the city with the windows down, feeling like they're, fancy. So they're very excited.
All right. Very cool. So, we talk a lot about changing your family tree. And I think most people think about that and they think about, their kids, the next generation, not the last generation. What inspired you to, take a look at the last generation and see what you could do to help?
I'm very grateful to my parents for so many things. I think they've worked very hard for their entire lives. And they're getting older, and their health and welfare in terms of both physical health and financial health, like ultimately I'm going to take responsibility for that, because there's no way in the world that I would let them be in any sort of distress or need. Like ultimately I'm going to pay for whatever is needed for them. So it's, I suppose you could say it's selfish in a way that as I think about it, their financial welfare is ultimately my financial welfare too, because I love them and care about them. And I'm going to make sure they have anything that they need. And I don't necessarily trust their judgment in all things. So moving to San Diego is also helpful to make sure that I can, help them do things that they need to do that are the best for them. And yeah, I suppose that's what I would think of with that. And, your kids, you hope that they grow up and make good choices. But they're kind of unknown entities. You have lots of hope, but you don't have lots of data. And for my parents, I actually have lots of data, and I know exactly what they're going to do in most situations. So it makes them far more predictable than my kids.
Yeah, very cool. Well, the interesting thing about this is you're at a place where you're having to balance, right? You're balancing your own financial life with their financial life, the classic sandwich generation kind of situation. So how have you found balance in, how much you're using your financial resources, your income, et cetera, to help them versus getting yourself into a position where you can help more from a position of strength?
Absolutely. The interesting thing is they have a lot of pride and don't want for me to pay for things or do things for them. But they will get to the point that they need it. So I see taking small measures kind of after talking to them about it and advising things for them, really as increasing their autonomy and kind of respecting their ability to take care of themselves as incredibly independent people that, both of them were on their own and didn't have any help from their parents from very early ages. So it's something that they're very used to. And I think they don't ask for help, have never asked for help, and probably won't ask for help. So I'm just trying to preserve their independence as long as I can.
Yeah, very cool. You haven't gone to the point where you have a dedicated savings account. This is my helping parents account or anything like that, or you haven't gone and bought them a, long-term care insurance policy or anything like that?
I think moving to San Diego and kind of being very close to them and buying a house with room on the first floor that is kind of just dedicated as currently it's an office, but it'll eventually be a grandparent room. I'd say we're kind of self-insuring for long-term care insurance, where we made lifestyle choices that will allow us to be there for them. And if at some point somebody has an illness and needs additional care, they probably will live with us and get that care as a part of our kind of day-to-day lives, with a hired nurse or something. I have money saved, but I don't have a dedicated account for that.
Very cool. All right. Well, what's next for you? I mean, you've accomplished something pretty cool here. What are you working on next in your life?
Yeah. We have a projection for financial independence by, within the next 10 years. And so I'm just tracking to make sure we're on track for that. And as illustrated with my parents, I automate a lot of things, like our bank accounts. Really, our paychecks get split up into 6 different bank accounts so that we live in that same kind of behavioral finance process that my parents do, actually. And we're just chugging along. It's all automated. I don't have to pay attention to it. I check into it once in a while and make sure that we're in accordance with our written financial plan. And it's pretty easy.
Awesome. Preach it. I love it. Okay, Rebecca, you've done something incredible. You've got, not only have you helped your parents in a significant way, but you have managed, after 244 prior Milestone to Millionaire episodes, to come up with a new milestone we have never celebrated. Thank you so much for being willing to come on, be so vulnerable, talk about you and your family, and inspire others to maybe look a little bit at the last generation and see what they can do to help. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you so much. Thanks for all you do.
All right. Great interview with Rebecca. That was a lot of fun. I love doing new milestones. I've got a set list of questions for each of the popular milestones. I had none for that one. So it ends up just being completely conversational. And that's always a lot of fun for me. So we don't mind new milestones. We'll celebrate whatever milestone you have, and we'll pitch it and format it in some way that we can use it to help others to get closer to their own financial goals. But I promised you at the top of this podcast that we would talk about helping parents. Okay. Now, some of us are estranged from our parents. I get that. Maybe there was abuse or a relationship broke down. You feel no need whatsoever to help your parents. That's fine. But recognize that there is a significant portion, large percentage of the audience out there that we feel at least some amount of love and concern and care for our parents. And our parents sometimes are very good at finances. They're financially literate, et cetera. But I would say it's more common that we're the first ones in our generation, not only with our income, but with our level of financial literacy. So it doesn't take much to be able to provide a lot of help when you're not only in the financial position that most white coat investors are in, but you have a level of financial literacy that most white coat investors have. When I first became financially literate, the first people I started thinking about was my parents. And it turned out, as we dove into it, that they were overpaying for terrible financial advice. I can't remember what the asset under management fee was. My recollection is it was 2% or something like that. And what was this quote unquote financial advisor doing? He was dumping my parents into individual stocks and high expense ratio mutual funds and all this bizarre stuff. And it was interesting, because the conversations I had with my parents were, well, what if you just bought all the stocks? What if you just dumped it into index funds? How much would you have now instead of what you have? And investing was relatively new to them. And my dad worked primarily for a pension throughout his career. It wasn't until he was kind of, retiring from his, public job and doing similar work as an independent contractor that he really started, getting paid more and putting money away for retirement. So they're still mostly retired on that pension and Social Security. But they were able to build a nest egg in those last few years of his career, which has continued to compound since. But I kind of came along at the very beginning of this nest egg building process. He was still making contributions at that point. I was in residency. I'd just become financially literate. And I'm like, what is going on here? And so we talked about it. We did some financial education. And over the course of 2 or 3 years, they decided, okay, we're going to quit paying this guy 2% or whatever a year to underperform the market. And we're just going to get the market returns and not, pay anything. And so, I helped with that process, helped them to manage money using a pretty simple, even simpler than my asset allocation investment plan, all at Vanguard. And they've followed that since. It's been more than 20 years now. They've been following this investment plan. Their money has continued to grow. They're paying almost nothing in investment expenses. And frankly, it's super easy to manage their portfolio, right? I go in there once a year, literally, for less than 20 minutes. And we rebalance the account and take their RMD. That's it. In fact, usually they just reinvest the RMD in the taxable account that was started when they started taking RMDs. This year I've finally managed to talk them into spending some of it. They're doing a renovation, which I think is great. They're doing well from that perspective. But it has made a significant difference, not only in how much wealth they have, but in how much comfort they feel, right? Because not only do they have somebody they know cares about them watching over this stuff, but they know that they're not doing anything stupid with their money, which I think hangs over a lot of our heads until we become financially literate. Now, do they love this stuff like I do? No. I got them to read like one financial book. That was it. Are they capable of being DIY investors? Probably not. Are they capable of understanding what we're doing and staying the course with the plan? Absolutely. And in fact, I had a conversation with them recently. They turned 80 this year. Conversation with them recently, and they're like, you know what? We had that fraud issue with the bank account a couple of years ago. We don't even really want to be directly accessing our investment account. We want to make sure we're going through you anytime we're pulling money out. I'm like, well, that's a real vote of confidence that they feel that way about me. And I don't mind doing that. It's super easy for me to help them transfer money back. In fact, we had to relink a bank account. It turned out they hadn't taken any money out of their investing account in a couple of years. And so we had to relink the bank account to their investment account. But it's something that we can do for our parents. Now, be very careful doing this, right? When you are inserting yourself into your parents' finances, not only is there a certain level of responsibility there to make sure you're doing it right, but your siblings better be okay with it, or any other heirs to this estate better be okay with it, right? You got to better have a good relationship there and some trust there. Sometimes the best money spent is to hire them a real professional financial planner and investment manager, so you're not getting into trouble with your siblings that they think you're doing something underhanded, or worse, they're blaming you for terrible investment performance your parents had because you decided to put it all in NVIDIA and NVIDIA crashed or something. Who knows, right? Be a little bit conservative. Don't take a payment for what you're doing if this is the sort of thing you're comfortable doing with your family, and make sure everybody else knows what's going on, that this isn't some sort of, a thing being done in the back room behind everybody's back. Other ways you can help your parents, right? Maybe you can help them to buy a car, like in Rebecca's situation. Maybe you can help them to sort through their various insurance policies. Maybe there's a long-term care insurance policy, or there's a health insurance policy, or something that you can help them to sort through. Maybe you can help them decide when they need to stop driving, when they need to stop flying, in the case of my dad. These sorts of issues that you run into as you get older. Because for all of us, there's these questions. What do we do when we're not competent to manage our own financial or physical or whatever affairs? Who's going to be helping us with that? And there's a lot of ways you can help your parents to prepare for those moments. And if you recognize that they're not prepared at all, maybe this can be one of your financial goals that you're working toward. Maybe you can put a little bit of money aside, knowing that, of course, you're going to help your parents, and now you have the means to do so. It is far easier to help from a position of strength, right? It's way easier to pull somebody up onto a ledge than it is to push them up onto a ledge. And so keep that in mind as you go through your own financial life, and it intertwines with those of not only your children, but of your parents. Hope that's helpful to you. This podcast was sponsored by Bob Baiani at Protuity. One listener sent us this review. Bob's been absolutely terrific to work with. He always quickly and clearly communicated with me by both email and or telephone, with responses to my inquiries usually coming the same day. I have somewhat of a unique situation. Bob has been able to help explain the implications and underwriting process in a clear and professional manner. contact Bob at whitecoatinvestor.com/protuity. You can email info@protuity.com, or you can call 973-771-9100. But however you do it, if you need your disability insurance to be reviewed or you just need to get it in place, do it today. Don't put it off. Worst case scenario, you might not be able to get it at all if you wait any longer, but getting it sooner keeps the price down. Thanks for everything you do out there. It is not easy work you're doing. We recognize that. We're grateful for you. We're grateful for your work. We're grateful for what you're doing for your family members and friends and colleagues and trainees with regards to financial education. We appreciate it. You're helping us to fulfill our mission here at the White Coat Investor to help you get a fair shake on Wall Street. We'll see you next time on the podcast.
The hosts of The White Coat Investor are not licensed accountants, attorneys, or financial advisors. This podcast is for your entertainment and information only. It should not be considered professional or personalized financial advice. You should consult the appropriate professional for specific advice relating to your situation.